The engagement did not break with a scream. It broke with a stamp, a silence, and a king who did not reach for her hand. Claire Bennett stood beside Alpha King Dominic Blackwell in the grand hall of Blackwell Palace while the council decided the shape of her humiliation. No one called it that. They called it review. They called it necessity. They called it bloodline responsibility. Words were useful that way. They could dress cruelty in formal robes and make everyone bow before it. Claire stood still. Her fair hands rested in front of her soft blue dress. The engagement ring on her finger caught the chandelier light each time she breathed. It was a beautiful ring. Silver band. Moonstone center. Blackwell crest carved beneath the setting where no one could see it unless they held her hand close. Dominic had placed it there 1 year ago. Not in this hall. Not before council. In the winter garden, when snow had covered the roses and his voice had been lower than command. "You will stand beside me," he had said. At the time, Claire had mistaken that for love. Now she stood beside him exactly as promised, and he did not even look at her. Across the hall, Vanessa Hart stood beneath the royal banners in a pale ivory gown, her golden hair pinned with pearls, her posture perfect enough to make elders smile with relief. Strong bloodline. Old alliance. Noble birth. A woman the council could call suitable without lowering their voices. Claire was suitable when Dominic needed steadiness. Vanessa was suitable now that politics wanted beauty with pedigree. Elder Hawthorne opened the sealed document with slow fingers. The council recommends temporary suspension of the engagement between His Majesty Alpha King Dominic Blackwell and Miss Claire Bennett, pending formal review of the Hart bloodline claim. Temporary. Claire heard the words settle across the room like snow over a grave. Soft. Clean. Cold enough to bury something alive. A murmur passed through the nobles. No one gasped. That hurt more. They had expected this. Perhaps discussed it. Perhaps smiled at her over breakfast while already knowing she would be unchosen before sunset. Claire kept her eyes forward. Dominic's profile remained still beside her. Dark hair. Sharp jaw. Gray eyes fixed on the council table as if this were an inconvenience in policy, not the public dismantling of the woman he had asked to wear his ring. Elder Hawthorne turned to him. "Your Majesty, do you object to the suspension?" There. One sentence. One opening. One chance to make the hall remember she was not a chair being moved from one side of the throne to another. Claire did not turn her head. She did not beg with her eyes. She did not lean toward him. She only waited. Dominic's hand remained at his side. Not reaching. Not defending. Not hers. His voice came calm. "This is only temporary." The hall exhaled. Claire did not. Because temporary was not a defense. Temporary was what men said when they wanted a woman to bleed quietly until they decided whether the wound mattered. Vanessa lowered her eyes with graceful concern. It was almost perfect. Almost. Claire saw the relief beneath it. Of course she did. Women who had been trained to survive rooms like this learned to read the corner of a mouth, the pause before pity, the tiny victory hidden beneath lowered lashes. Elder Hawthorne nodded. "Then the engagement will be suspended effective immediately." A clerk pressed the red council stamp onto the contract. The sound was small, flat, final. Claire felt it in her chest. Dominic finally looked at her. Only for a moment. His gaze said, "Be patient." His silence said, "Do not make this harder." Claire looked back at him with the calm face everyone praised because it never troubled them. Then she lowered her eyes to the ring. Still on her finger. Still shining. Still pretending. A servant approached with the amended contract. The red word suspended cut across both names. Dominic Blackwell. Claire Bennett. Her name looked smaller beneath the ink. Someone near the front whispered, "She is taking it well." Claire almost smiled. Almost. Taking it well. As if a woman's dignity could be measured by how little noise she made while being reduced in public. The council dismissed the assembly. People began moving again. Soft footsteps. Careful glances. Vanessa approaching Dominic with sympathy ready on her face. Claire stepped back before she had to watch that too closely. No one stopped her. That was the first truth the broken engagement gave her. When she was useful, everyone expected her to remain. When she was wounded, everyone allowed her to leave alone. Claire walked out of the grand hall with the ring still on her hand, the red stamp still burning behind her eyes, and a silence so complete that even Dominic did not understand it had already become goodbye. The cruelest silence is not the one that follows a wound. It is the one that asks the wounded woman to remain graceful while everyone decides whether she still has value. Claire Bennett did not go to her room immediately. That would have looked like retreat. And Blackwell Palace had always been skilled at turning a woman's pain into evidence against her. So she walked through the eastern corridor slowly, with her hands folded and the engagement ring still shining on her finger, as if the council had not just stamped her future in red ink. Servants lowered their eyes when she passed, not from respect, from discomfort. They had seen the announcement, or heard it already. News moved through palaces faster than mercy. Miss Bennett's engagement was suspended. Vanessa Hart had returned. The council was reviewing bloodline suitability. Temporary, they would say. Always temporary. Claire had learned that temporary humiliation often lasted long enough to become a woman's place. At the end of the corridor, she reached the old portrait gallery and stopped near the velvet curtain that led to the private council passage. Voices moved beyond it. Low, male, certain. She should have kept walking. She knew that. But then she heard Dominic's name. Your Majesty, Miss Bennett took the announcement well, Elder Hawthorne said. That is encouraging. A pause. Then Vanessa's softer voice. She looked hurt. Claire stood very still. For one dangerous second, she almost appreciated the honesty. Then Hawthorne answered, hurt is manageable. Scandal is not. Claire's fingers pressed together. The ring bit lightly into her skin. Dominic spoke then. She will not make this difficult. The sentence was calm. Too calm. It entered Claire without force, which somehow made it worse. Hawthorne gave a low sound of approval. Then she understands the necessity. Dominic's answer came after a short silence. Claire understands her place. There it was. Not shouted. Not meant for her. That was why it cut cleanest. Claire looked down at the ring. The moonstone seemed duller in the corridor light. Her place. For 1 year, she had believed her place beside Dominic meant partnership. Quiet perhaps. Political, yes. But real in the places where no one else looked. She had remembered his meals when he forgot them. Read reports before council, so he would not enter unprepared. Sat beside healers after border fights because he hated being watched while injured, but allowed her to change the bandages. She had learned which windows he preferred open, which nobles lied with praise, which silences meant anger and which meant exhaustion. And all of that, apparently, had become her place. A useful corner of his life. A woman steady enough not to inconvenience the throne. Behind the curtain, Vanessa said softly, I do not wish to cause her pain. Dominic did not answer quickly. When he did, his voice held no cruelty. That almost broke her more. This is only temporary. Temporary. Again. As if repeating the word could make public rejection smaller. As if Claire could fold herself quietly into a waiting room and sit there until the king decided whether love was politically safe enough to remember. She stepped back from the curtain. No gasp. No stumble. No dramatic hand over her mouth. Only a stillness so deep it felt like something inside her had frozen to survive being touched. She understood now. Dominic did not think he had chosen Vanessa. Not yet. That was how he would excuse it. He thought he had chosen time. Procedure. Patience. He thought Claire would understand because she always had. But she finally understood something too. He loved the convenience of her silence more than he feared the cost of losing her. That was enough. Claire turned away from the private passage and walked toward her chamber. This time, she did not slow for servants. She did not look at the winter garden through the arched windows. She did not touch the ring again. Inside her room, everything waited exactly as she had left it that morning. The blue shawl over the chair. The unread book beside the bed. The silver hairpin that had belonged to her mother resting on the vanity tray. The room looked lived in. Trusted. Temporary. Claire closed the door. Locked it. Then stood in the center of the room and let the palace continue breathing without her permission. She did not cry. Crying would have required hoping someone might care about the sound. Instead, she crossed to the writing desk where the suspended engagement contract had been delivered by a nervous clerk. Her name was still beneath Dominic's. Red ink across both. She sat down, removed the engagement ring. It resisted for half a second, catching at her knuckle as if even silver had learned to hold. Then it came free. Claire placed it carefully on top of the contract. Not thrown, not hidden, not returned with a letter begging to be understood. Placed, perfectly centered over the word suspended. Then she took her mother's silver hairpin from the vanity and set it in her palm. That she would keep, not because it was valuable, because it had belonged to a woman who once told her that love should never require a daughter to disappear politely. Claire opened a small travel bag. One dress, one cloak, a pouch of coins, the hairpin, nothing from Dominic, nothing from the palace, nothing that could be mistaken for a wish to be called back. Outside her window, evening darkened over Blackwell Palace. Inside, Claire Bennett folded her life into silence, leaving the ring behind like the first sentence Dominic would understand too late. A woman does not always know she is leaving until her hands begin choosing what her heart has not yet said aloud. Claire Bennett packed as if sound itself might betray her. The palace outside her door continued its evening rituals. Servants carried dinner trays through the west corridor. Guards changed posts beneath the high windows. Somewhere below, council members were likely drinking warmed wine and speaking of balance, bloodline, and the merciful patience of women they had never bothered to understand. Claire folded a plain travel dress and placed it in the small leather bag, then a second pair of stockings, then the pouch of coins she had saved from her own allowance, never knowing why she kept it separate until that moment. She did not touch the blue gowns Dominic liked. She did not take the pearl comb he had once given her after a treaty dinner. She left the black velvet cloak lined with royal silver, because it carried the Blackwell crest at the throat, and she refused to leave wrapped in the name that had just made her optional. Her mother's hairpin went into the inner pocket. That was enough inheritance, enough identity, enough reminder. On the desk, the engagement ring rested over the red-stamped contract. Suspended. The word looked almost vulgar beneath the moonstone. Claire stared at it for a long moment, not because she wanted to change her mind, but because some endings deserved witnesses even if the only witness was the woman surviving them. The ring had once felt warm on her hand. Now her bare finger felt colder and truer. A knock came at the door. Claire went still. Claire. Dominic. Not urgent. Not soft. The voice of a man who believed doors opened because his name stood on every stone beyond them. She did not answer. Another pause. I know today was difficult. Difficult. Claire looked at the ring. Publicly removing a woman from her own future was difficult. Being expected to understand it was duty. Leaving quietly would be called emotional. Funny how language always found shelter for power first. Dominic continued through the door. We should speak after dinner. After dinner. Not now. Not before Vanessa sat at a table where Claire had once arranged seating so Dominic would not have to endure Hawthorne on his left. Not before the council saw that he had soothed the woman they had embarrassed. Later, when it was convenient. When she could be patient again. Claire crossed the room without sound and stood on the other side of the door. Wood between them. Years between them. Her hand lifted toward the latch. Stopped. She imagined opening it. Dominic's face would be controlled, perhaps tired. He would explain bloodline pressure, temporary suspension, political necessity. He would say she mattered. He would not say why he had let them stamp her name in front of everyone. He would ask her to wait. And the worst part was that he would believe waiting cost her nothing because she had made endurance look gentle for too long. Claire lowered her hand. Dominic waited. For the first time, she let him wait alone. I will come by later, he said at last. Footsteps moved away. Not fast. Not worried. That answered the final question. Claire turned from the door. She did not need his explanation. A woman could drown in explanations when the truth was already breathing in front of her. She moved to the wardrobe and removed the last thing she wanted, a dark travel cloak without crest or embroidery. It belonged to no kingdom, no promise, no suspended contract. She fastened it at her throat with her mother's hairpin. Silver against dark wool. Plain. Strong. Hers. Before leaving, Claire walked through the room once more. Not dramatically. Carefully. The bed was made. The curtains tied back. The fire lowered but not dead. The books aligned on the shelf. The tea tray untouched. She made the room neat because she wanted no one to say she had fled in chaos. Let them see order. Let them see choice. Let them open the door and understand that she had not been taken by grief. She had taken herself. At the writing desk, she almost reached for paper. One sentence tempted her. You broke more than an engagement. But she did not write it. Letters were invitations to respond. She was not leaving a conversation open. She was closing a door. Claire lifted the travel bag. It was lighter than she expected. 7 years of service to a palace. 1 year of engagement to a king. A lifetime of being praised for being easy to keep. All of it fit into silence and a bag small enough to carry alone. She opened her chamber door. The corridor was empty. Good. The palace did not know yet. It still believed she was inside, being graceful. Still believed Dominic could come later and smooth the day into something tolerable. Still believed a woman with a ring removed from her hand would sit beside the wound and wait for permission to heal. Claire stepped into the corridor and closed the door behind her. No lock, no note, no backward glance. She walked past the mirror in the hall and caught one brief reflection. Fair skin, soft brown hair, a round, pretty face too calm for the story people would tell tomorrow. They would say she had been hurt. They would be right. They would say she had overreacted. They would be wrong. At the far end of the corridor, a servant carrying linen stopped. Miss Bennett. Claire turned slightly. The girl's eyes dropped to Claire's bare hand. Understanding moved across her face. Then fear. Claire gave her a small nod. Not pleading. Not asking secrecy. Just acknowledgement from one quiet woman to another. The servant lowered her gaze and stepped aside. Claire continued walking. Down the eastern stairs. Past the healer room where she had once sat beside Dominic through a poisoned arrow wound while he slept with his hand closed around hers. Past the council corridor where her name had become negotiable. Past the winter garden where a king had promised she would stand beside him and forgot that beside was not the same as beneath. The palace lamps glowed gold against stone. Beautiful. Unkind. Behind her, dinner bells rang. Ahead, the service passage led toward the eastern gate. Claire Bennett did not hurry. She had spent too many years being convenient to make leaving look like panic. She walked steadily through the sleeping body of Blackwell Palace, carrying no letter, no ring, no title, and no expectation that anyone would call her name before she reached the door. And because no one did, the silence finally stopped feeling like abandonment. It began to feel like escape. The palace slept because it had never believed Claire Bennett was brave enough to leave before anyone gave her permission. The eastern service passage was colder than the royal corridors. There were no tapestries here. No portraits of Blackwell kings with silver eyes and victorious hands. Only stone walls, narrow windows, and the smell of damp winter air slipping through cracks the servants knew better than nobles did. Claire walked with her travel bag held close and her cloak drawn around her shoulders. The mother's hairpin at her throat caught the faint light each time she passed a wall lamp. Silver. Plain. Hers. Behind her, dinner bells faded into the deeper body of the palace. The grand dining hall would be filling now. Council members taking their seats. Vanessa Hart perhaps placed near Dominic's right side because no one wanted to admit what that meant while the suspension was still called temporary. Claire imagined Dominic glancing at the empty place where she should have been. Not worried. Not yet. Annoyed, perhaps. Displeased that she had chosen the first dinner after public humiliation to be absent. He would think she needed time. He would allow it. That was how power comforted itself. By naming a woman's withdrawal as something temporary until it became too late to call her back. Claire reached the healer corridor and slowed. She had not planned to stop. But the door stood half open, and the room beyond carried the scent of crushed herbs, clean linen, and old memories. Dominic had nearly died there once. 3 summers ago. A poisoned arrow from the borderlands had entered beneath his ribs, and every healer in Blackwell had worked through the night while the council whispered about succession outside the door. Claire had sat by his bed after they left. Not as Luna. Not as fiancée then. Just as the woman who knew he hated waking alone. He had opened his eyes before dawn, feverish and furious at weakness, and found her hand wrapped around his. You stayed, he had rasped. Claire had smiled because she had not yet learned that staying could become a habit other people stopped valuing. Yes. He had closed his eyes again. Good. Good. Not thank you. Not please. Good. At the time, she had thought it intimate. Now she heard the beginning of everything. Claire stepped away from the healer room. No goodbye belonged there. The council corridor came next. The lamps were low. The doors closed. Through one of them, laughter moved faintly, warm from wine and relief. Perhaps the elders were congratulating themselves on managing the engagement without scandal. They had managed nothing. They had only mistaken quiet for consent again. Claire passed the velvet curtain where she had heard Dominic say her place so clearly. For one moment, her steps faltered, not from doubt, from the body remembering exactly where it learned the last truth it needed. Claire understands her place. She looked at the curtain, then at her bare hand. Yes, She whispered into the empty corridor. I do now. Her place was not beside a man who kept her only when politics made it easy. Not in a hall where her future could be stamped by elders before dinner. Not in a palace that used her silence as proof she was gentle enough to be wounded politely. Her place was wherever she could breathe without being called difficult for needing air. She continued. At the lower stairs, she met Thomas, the old night steward, carrying a lantern and a ledger under one arm. He stopped so abruptly the lantern swung. Miss Bennett. Claire paused. Thomas had served Blackwell Palace for 40 years. He had taught new maids where to find winter blankets. He had once brought Claire tea at midnight after Dominic returned from battle bleeding and angry and refusing care from anyone else. His eyes dropped to the travel bag, then to her hand. The ring was gone. Something old and sad moved across his face. Does His Majesty know? Claire's answer came softly. No, Thomas swallowed. Should I send word? No. He looked toward the upper halls, torn between duty and decency. Claire did not plead. She would not ask him to betray the king he had served all his life. But neither would she surrender the first clean choice she had made in years. After a long moment, Thomas stepped aside. Not far. Just enough. The Eastern Gate guard changes in 6 minutes, he said quietly. Claire's throat tightened. That was all. 6 minutes. A kindness shaped like information. Thank you, she said. Thomas lowered his head. No, Miss Bennett. His voice roughened. Forgive us. Claire could not answer that. Not because forgiveness was impossible. Because it was too large to hand out in a corridor while carrying the pieces of herself away. She walked past him. The service door opened to the outer courtyard. Winter entered immediately, cold enough to sting her face, honest enough to wake her fully. Above, Blackwell Palace rose in towers and dark glass, every window holding someone else's version of belonging. Claire crossed the courtyard without looking up. Her carriage waited beyond the eastern arch. Not royal, not marked. A neutral hired carriage arranged through a merchant widow who owed Claire a favor from years ago, when Claire had quietly paid off a border tax mistake before the council could ruin the woman's trade license. People remembered different things than kings did. The driver stood beside the horses, his hat pulled low. Miss Bennett. Yes. Road to Ashford? For tonight. Beyond Ashford, she had no plan. That frightened her less than staying. The eastern gate rose ahead, iron and black stone, closed but not yet barred for the night. Claire took one last breath of palace air. Pine smoke, snow, stone, duty. Then she reached into her cloak pocket. For half a heartbeat, her fingers searched for the ring. Habit. Nothing more. Her hand found the hairpin instead. Good. The gate guard looked at the driver, then at Claire, then at her bare finger. Recognition flickered. He opened his mouth. The bell from the upper palace rang once. Dinner hour. Not alarm. Not yet. Claire looked at him calmly. I am leaving. The guard hesitated. No order had been given to stop her, because no one had believed she would go. That was the beautiful, terrible weakness of men who mistook possession for loyalty. They did not guard doors they thought you would never use. The gate chains began to move. Slowly, iron rising against stone. The carriage door opened. Claire placed one foot on the step, and for the first time all evening, behind her, far inside the palace, a second bell rang wrong. Sharp. Interrupted. Not dinner. Discovery. Someone had opened her chamber door. Someone had found the empty room. Someone had seen the ring. Claire did not turn. Not yet. The eastern gate widened before her. The road beyond lay dark, cold, and unpromised. She lifted her bag into the carriage. Her bare hand closed around the door frame. Behind her, Blackwell Palace finally woke. But Claire Bennett had already learned the difference between being missed and being valued. And she would not confuse the sound of pursuit with love. A king can command 1,000 doors to close, but he cannot command time to wait until he finally understands what has already walked through one. Dominic Blackwell found the ring before he found the meaning. That was the first mercy and the first punishment. Claire's chamber was too neat. Not empty in the careless way of someone angry. Empty in the precise way of someone who had taken only what belonged to her and left everything else behind without drama. The bed was made. The curtains were tied back. The fire had been lowered safely. The blue shawl still rested over the chair. The pearl comb he had once given her lay untouched on the vanity tray. A book sat beside the bed with a ribbon marking the last page she would never return to finish. Dominic stood in the doorway for several seconds, irritated before fear arrived. That was how badly he misunderstood her. He thought this was a statement, a quiet punishment, a woman wounded enough to make absence visible. Then he saw the desk. The suspended engagement contract lay open beneath the lamp, red stamp cutting across both names. Suspended. Above that word, perfectly centered, rested the moonstone ring. His ring. Her ring. No, the ring he had given her and failed to defend. Dominic crossed the room slowly. The palace sounds behind him faded. His hand reached for the ring, then stopped above it. He did not touch it. Not yet. Because something about the way she had placed it there made touching feel like disturbing a grave. There was no letter. No accusation. No request. No tear-stained page begging him to understand what he had done. That was when irritation began to break apart. Claire had always written notes. Small ones. Practical ones. You forgot the Eastern Treaty file. The healer said no writing before the stitches close. Eat before council, or you will frighten the diplomats. He had kept some without admitting why. She gave words to everyone else's needs. Tonight, she had given him none. The absence of a letter was not anger. It was conclusion. Dominic picked up the contract. His name looked exactly as it always had. Large. Dark. Unmoved by red ink. Claire's name looked smaller beneath the stamp. He stared at it until the word temporary rose in his mind and sickened him. This is only temporary. He had said it in the hall, as if a public wound paused being painful because he intended to repair it later. As if Claire could stand before nobles, hear her future suspended, watch Vanessa step into political favor, and remain untouched because he had not meant it as rejection. Not meant. The excuse of cowards who harmed without planning the cost. Dominic's wolf stirred uneasily. A scent remained in the room. Claire's lavender soap. Winter air. The faint trace of hurt, so controlled it had never been allowed to turn sharp. He turned toward the wardrobe. Opened it. Her gowns remained. His favorites remained. The royal cloak remained. The practical travel cloak was gone. A small space on the vanity tray sat empty. The silver hairpin. Her mother's. Dominic remembered it suddenly, though he had never thought about it for more than a second while she wore it. That was the violence of loss. It made details wholly after indifference had made them invisible. A servant appeared at the door, breathless and pale. Your Majesty? Dominic turned. The girl looked past him into the room and saw the ring in his hand. Her face changed. Fear. Pity. Knowledge. Where is she? Dominic asked. The girl lowered her eyes. I do not know. The answer was too quick. Dominic stepped closer. Where is Claire? The girl trembled but did not speak. Thomas, the night steward, appeared behind her with a lantern. Old. Still. Guilty. Dominic's voice dropped. You saw her. Thomas did not deny it. Yes, Your Majesty. When? Minutes ago. Dominic felt the room narrow. Where? Thomas lifted his chin with the fragile courage of a man choosing decency too late. The Eastern Gate. Dominic moved before thought finished. Through the corridor. Past the portrait gallery. Past the private council passage where he had spoken words he had not known she heard. Claire understands her place. The sentence struck him now with its true shape. Not strategy. Not reassurance. A blade he had handed to the room and left in her back. He reached the lower stairs at a run. Servants scattered. A guard called for his cloak. Dominic did not stop. The palace that had always arranged itself around his pace could barely keep up with the first honest fear he had felt all evening. Not fear of scandal. Not fear of council disruption. Fear of a bare finger. A neat room. A ring placed where forgiveness should have been asked for before it was needed. He burst into the outer courtyard as the eastern gate stood half open. Cold air hit him. Beyond the arch, the neutral carriage waited with its door open. Claire was there. One hand on the carriage frame. Dark cloak around her shoulders. Travel bag already inside. No ring. No hesitation. For one unbearable second, Dominic saw her not as wounded, not as emotional, not as the woman who would calm down by morning. He saw her leaving. Truly leaving. Claire. Her name left him before command could shape it. She stopped. Not because he had power. Because she chose to turn. Slowly, she looked back. Her face was calm. That frightened him more than tears would have. Dominic crossed the courtyard toward her. The guard stood frozen at the gate. The driver held the reins and wisely said nothing. Dominic stopped a few steps away. Too close to be nothing. Too far to touch. I went to your room, he said. I know. Her voice was soft, flat with exhaustion. Not invitation. You left the ring. Yes. He swallowed. We need to speak. No, the word was quiet. Complete. Dominic stared at her as if language itself had changed. Claire looked at him with the kind of gentleness people mistook for weakness until they met its edge. You had the hall, she said. You had the council. You had the corridor behind the curtain. You had a door outside my room. A pause. You had many chances to speak before I reached the gate. Dominic's chest tightened. Claire, I did not mean for this to become. Do not finish that sentence. He stopped. For once, because she told him to. The gate chains creaked in the wind. Claire's bare hand rested on the carriage door. Dominic saw the pale mark where the ring had been. The absence looked louder than any accusation. I can fix this, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. No, she replied. You can only decide whether you are going to make it worse. He did not understand. Not fast enough. So he stepped instinctively in front of the carriage door. Not touching her. Not ordering the guard. But blocking the way. Claire's eyes changed. Not fear. Disappointment, so clean it nearly broke him. Move, she said. Or prove you still think my leaving requires your permission. The words entered him colder than winter. Behind them, the palace held its breath. Dominic stood between Claire and the road, and finally saw the choice for what it was. If he stopped her, he would keep the body and lose the woman forever. If he moved, he might lose her anyway, but at least he would not deserve it more. His hands opened at his sides. Slowly, Dominic Blackwell stepped away from the carriage door. The road beyond appeared between them. Claire watched him do it. No gratitude. No softness. Only acknowledgement that he had chosen not to become the cage she was leaving. Dominic's voice came rough. If I ask for one conversation, he said, will you choose the place? Claire looked past him to the dark eastern road. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she climbed into the carriage. Before the door closed, her eyes returned to his. One conversation, she said. Ashford. Tomorrow. Public tea room. No guards inside. A pause. And do not bring the ring. The carriage door closed. The driver snapped the reins. Dominic stood at the gate, while Claire Bennett left Blackwell Palace without a word more. The wheels rolled into the dark. The road took her. And for the first time in his reign, the Alpha King understood that letting someone leave could hurt more than losing a war. Because war took what it could not ask for. But Claire had waited to be valued. And when he failed, she chose the door herself. A conversation granted after goodbye is not forgiveness. It is only the smallest door a woman leaves unlocked to see whether a man has learned how to knock. Ashford woke beneath a pale winter sky. The town was smaller than Blackwell's eastern villages, built around one stone bridge, 2 market streets, and a square where travelers changed horses before continuing toward the southern roads. Claire Bennett arrived before sunrise. She had not slept in the carriage. Rest required safety, and safety still felt too new to trust with closed eyes. She rented a modest room above the tea house facing the square, paid in coins from her own pouch, and asked the innkeeper for a public table near the window at noon. The woman glanced at Claire's cloak, then at her bare left hand. She asked no questions. Claire appreciated that more than kindness. Questions could become hooks. By late morning, Claire had washed her face, pinned her soft brown hair with her mother's silver hairpin, and changed into a plain gray dress that belonged to no court, no engagement, no expectation. In the mirror, she looked tired. Fair skin pale from a sleepless night. Round cheeks softened by exhaustion. Eyes calm because everything louder had burned out before dawn. She touched her bare finger once. Not in regret. In recognition. A ring could leave a mark even after it was gone. So could a year of being told she mattered by a man who did not defend her when matching became inconvenient. At noon, she went downstairs. The public tea room smelled of cinnamon, bread, and wet wool. Merchants sat near the hearth. 2 old women shared a pot of black tea by the back wall. A young couple argued quietly over travel costs. Ordinary noise. Claire chose the table near the window. Public enough that no command could dress itself as intimacy. Private enough for truth to stand without an audience leaning too close. She ordered tea, then waited. Dominic Blackwell arrived exactly on time. No guards entered with him. No royal cloak. No ring box. Only a dark coat, damp at the shoulders from the light snow, and a face that looked as if the night had removed something proud from beneath his skin. The tea room noticed him. Of course it did. Wolves always knew when a stronger one entered. Conversations lowered. Chairs shifted. But Dominic did not look at anyone else. His eyes found Claire. Then her bare hand. Pain crossed his face quickly. Not performed. Still not enough. Claire lifted her cup. You came without guards. You asked me to. I asked you not to bring them inside. I left them outside town. She looked at him. That answer mattered. Not because she had demanded it. Because he had not searched for the smallest obedience possible. He had understood the shape of the request. Dominic stopped beside the chair across from her. May I sit? The question entered her slowly. Last night, he would have sat. Last week, he would have expected her to make space. Last year, she would have been pleased he came at all. Claire nodded once. He sat. Across from her. Not beside. Good. For a moment, neither spoke. The server brought another cup, saw Dominic's face, nearly dropped the tray, and fled with admirable speed. Claire looked out the window at the square. You found the ring. Yes. And the contract. Yes. And still you came here thinking you could fix it. Dominic's hand tightened around his cup. I came here because you allowed one conversation. Claire looked back at him. That is better. His eyes lowered. I am late to many simple things. She did not soften. Not yet. Late truth could still be useful. But it did not become beautiful just because it arrived bleeding. Dominic inhaled once. I should have objected in the hall. Yes. I should have held your hand. No, he looked up. Claire's voice remained quiet. You should have asked whether I wanted to stand there at all. The correction struck him visibly. Good. Let him learn the wound was older than the announcement. He nodded slowly. You are right. I know. The answer left her before politeness could soften it. Dominic accepted it. That, too, was new. Claire placed both hands around her cup, letting the warmth steady her. You told them I understood my place. His jaw tightened. Yes. What was my place, Dominic? The question was not loud. It did not need to be. Outside, a cart rolled over wet stone. Inside, Dominic looked at the woman he had once thought would always wait within reach. His voice came low. Beside me. Claire almost smiled. Almost. No, his face changed. She continued. My place was where you needed steadiness, but not trouble. Where I could soothe, arrange, remember, wait, forgive, and make your life easier without asking the throne to make room for my pain. Dominic's eyes closed briefly. Claire did not stop. You did not mean beneath you. That is what makes it worse. He looked at her then. Worse. Yes. If you had meant to be cruel, I would have understood sooner. But you loved me most when loving me required nothing from you. Silence settled between them. Heavy. Honest. Dominic's wolf shifted behind his eyes, restless and ashamed. For once, he did not turn shame into defense. I did love you, he said. Claire looked at him. The sentence hurt. Not because she doubted it. Because part of her had known. A poor kind of love was still love. That was why leaving had taken everything. I know, she said. His breath caught. Claire continued, softer but not gentler. And it was not enough. There. The truth no council stamp had written. The truth no engagement ring could cover. Dominic lowered his gaze to the table. I suspended nothing, he said. I broke it. Claire watched him. Yes. I told myself temporary because I did not want to admit I was asking you to endure being publicly replaced while I decided how much courage politics would cost me. Yes. The repetition was not cruelty. It was confirmation. He had asked for a conversation. This was what conversation cost when it arrived after silence had been abused. Dominic reached into his coat. Claire's entire body went still. He noticed immediately and stopped. Slowly, he withdrew an empty hand. No ring, he said. I know. I watched. Pain flickered across his face. I brought the decree draft. I will dissolve the suspension publicly and state that the council acted without your consent and with my failure. Claire looked at him carefully. That protects your reputation too. No, he said. It damages it. A pause. It should. For the first time that day, Claire felt something shift. Not forgiveness. Not trust. Only the recognition that he had chosen loss of face over polished explanation. Dominic placed a folded paper on the table, but did not push it toward her. You do not have to return for it. You do not have to stand beside me. You do not have to read it if you do not want another Blackwell document in your life. Claire looked at the paper, then at him. What do you want? The old Dominic would have said, come back. This one looked as if the words were burning in his throat, and he had decided not to let them become another command. I want you not to leave believing you imagined the disrespect. Claire's fingers tightened around the cup. He continued, I want the palace to hear that your silence was not agreement. I want the council to know I failed you before they did. And I want one chance to ask what you need without assuming the answer is me. The tea room seemed to quiet around them. Claire looked away first, not because she was weak, because the words reached a place she had not invited him to touch yet. Outside, snow began again, soft against the window. She breathed through the ache. I need time, she said. You have it. I need distance. You have it. I need the right to refuse every letter, every meeting, every explanation. His voice roughened. You have it. Claire turned back. And I need you to understand that stepping aside at the carriage did not undo standing silent in the hall. Dominic's eyes held hers. I know. She searched his face for hidden impatience, for the old expectation that if he suffered visibly enough, she would become responsible for easing it. She found grief, regret, fear, but not demand. Not today. Claire stood. Dominic stood too, but did not move closer. Good. The conversation was over because she decided it was. She picked up her gloves. You may issue the decree, she said. His breath shifted. But do not use my name as proof of your remorse. He nodded. I won't. And do not come to Ashford again unless I send word. Yes. She took one step toward the stairs, then stopped. Without turning fully, she said, Dominic. Yes. If you want to learn where my place is, stop saying it before I choose it. The words landed. She heard him exhale. Not relief. Understanding beginning where command ended. Claire went upstairs alone. Behind her, the Alpha King remained in the public tea room with the untouched decree draft on the table and a cup of tea growing cold between his hands. For once, he did not follow. For once, he did not call her back. And for the first time since the engagement broke, Claire Bennett felt the silence after leaving become something other than pain. It became space. And space, she was learning, was where a woman could finally hear herself again. A decree can correct the record, but it cannot teach a wounded woman to trust the hand that signed it. Dominic Blackwell issued the decree at sunrise. Claire Bennett did not attend. That was her first condition. No public appearance beside him. No grateful smile before the council. No chance for the palace to turn his apology into proof that she had already forgiven what he finally admitted. She read the decree from the upstairs room in Ashford, seated by the window with a wool blanket over her knees and tea growing cold beside her. The paper arrived through Thomas, not a royal guard. That mattered. The old steward bowed at her door, eyes tired and kind, holding the folded document in both hands as if it weighed more than law. His Majesty said you were not required to read it, Thomas said. Claire almost smiled. Then why send it? Because he said you deserved proof that it was done. Proof, not persuasion. Better. Claire took the paper. No escort. Thomas shook his head. No message asking you to return. No ring. A flicker of sadness crossed his face. No ring, Miss Bennett. She opened the decree after he left. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. The suspension of the engagement had been enacted without Claire Bennett's consent. The council's review had publicly disrespected her standing. Alpha King Dominic Blackwell accepted responsibility for allowing that disrespect. No future marital arrangement involving Claire Bennett would be discussed, proposed, negotiated, or announced without her direct written consent. The Blackwell court would make no claim upon her presence. Her absence would not be treated as rebellion, scandal, or breach of duty. Claire read the last line twice. Her absence would not be treated as rebellion. How strange, to need a king's decree confirming that a woman leaving a room where she had been humiliated was not a crime. She folded the paper carefully, not because it healed her, because it was useful. Useful, she had decided, was not an insult when a thing served her instead of consuming her. Downstairs, the tea house carried on with morning life. Chairs scraped. Bread trays arrived. Someone laughed near the hearth. Ashford did not know what to do with a former fiancé of the Alpha King staying above the tea room, so it did the kindest possible thing. It sold her breakfast and left her alone. By afternoon, the first rumors arrived before the snow did. Dominic had shamed the council. Dominic had dismissed Hawthorne from private marriage review. Dominic had sent Vanessa Hart back to her family estate with honors, but no promise. Dominic had stood before the throne and said, Claire Bennett owed this kingdom nothing after I failed to honor what I asked of her. Claire heard that last part from the innkeeper's niece, who whispered it while pretending to refill the sugar bowl. Claire said only, "Thank you." The girl lingered. "Is it true you left before dawn?" Claire looked at her. The girl blushed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't ask." "No," Claire said softly. "You shouldn't." The girl fled. Claire did not blame her. Stories made people hungry, especially stories where a quiet woman finally moved and a powerful man had to explain the empty space she left behind. 3 days passed. Dominic did not come. No letters. No messenger except the neutral carrier who brought the official copy of the decree for her to keep. Claire slept better on the 4th night. Not well. Better. That felt like rebellion too. On the 5th day, she walked through Ashford Market alone. No escort. No Blackwell cloak. No ring. She bought apples, thread, and a pair of sturdy gloves because the southern road would be colder than she had planned for. She did not yet know where she was going after Ashford, but she knew she would not remain simply because Dominic had begun behaving correctly. Correct behavior was not a cage either. Near the apothecary, she heard 2 men speaking. "She'll return," one said. Women always soften once anger passes. Claire stopped beside a basket of dried lavender. The second man snorted. "Not if she has sense." The first laughed. "The king only needs to ask properly." Claire turned. Both men went silent when they recognized her. She looked at the first one. "The king did ask for one conversation properly." His face paled. "And I left after it." The second man lowered his eyes, trying not to smile. Claire paid for the lavender and continued walking. Her hands shook afterward. Not from fear. From the unfamiliar feeling of correcting a lie while it was still being born. That evening, back in her room, she placed the decree beside her mother's hairpin on the small writing desk. 2 objects. One from the woman who taught her love should not require disappearing. One from the man who had finally written into law that her disappearance had been his failure, not her shame. Claire sat with both in front of her. The room was quiet. Too quiet, perhaps. In palace life, quiet had always meant waiting for someone else's need. Here, quiet asked what she wanted. The question felt almost rude. She took out a blank sheet of paper. For a long time, she wrote nothing. Then she began a list. Not to Dominic. Not to the council. To herself. "What I want." The words looked fragile, so she made them less so. "A place where my name is not attached to a throne. Work that pays me directly. Windows that open. The right to leave without being called ungrateful. A conversation only when I choose one." She paused, then added, "To be loved in a way that notices when I go silent." Her throat tightened. She set the pen down. Outside, snow brushed against the window. Inside, Claire Bennett looked at the list and realized how little of it required a palace. Almost none. That should have made the past feel smaller. Instead, it made it sadder. Because she had once asked so little from Dominic, and he had still found a way to give her less when it mattered most. A knock came at the door. Claire folded the list immediately. "Who is it?" "The innkeeper, miss. There is a package from Blackwell Palace." No messenger waiting. Claire opened the door. The package was small, wrapped in plain brown cloth. No crest. No seal. Her name written carefully. Inside was the pearl comb Dominic had once given her. For one heartbeat, anger rose. Then she saw the note. Not a letter. One line. "This was yours to decide, not mine to keep." Claire stared at the comb. She had left it because it belonged to that version of her. The one who dressed for treaty dinners and sat beside him while nobles praised her quietness. Sending it back could have been manipulation. Except he had not asked anything. Not forgiveness. Not reply. Not memory. Only returned what he had no right to decide was discarded. Claire placed the comb on the desk beside the decree. 3 objects now. Hairpin. Decree. Comb. Past. Proof. Choice. She did not know whether she would keep the comb, sell it, or throw it into the river. The point was that the decision was hers. That night, she slept with the windows slightly open despite the cold. Fresh air entered the room. Sharp. Honest. Unowned. In Blackwell Palace, Dominic might have been awake, surrounded by consequences. In Ashford, Claire dreamed of a road that did not end at anyone's gate. And when morning came, she woke not healed, not settled, not ready to return, but rested enough to understand that leaving had not been the end of her story. It had only been the first chapter written in her own hand. Healing does not always begin when the apology arrives. Sometimes it begins the first morning a woman realizes she is no longer arranging her life around whether it will arrive at all. Claire Bennett left Ashford 9 days after the broken engagement. Not because Dominic Blackwell asked her to. Not because the town became unsafe. Not because whispers followed her too closely. She left because staying had begun to feel like waiting, and she had promised herself she would not build another cage out of a pause. The southern road opened beyond Ashford in a pale line of frost and winter grass. A hired carriage carried her toward Briar Glen, a neutral village known for its textile houses, open markets, and a widow-run boarding home that accepted women without asking whether they came with permission. Claire had read the name in a merchant ledger years ago. Back then, she had filed the knowledge away for someone else. A cousin, a servant, a trader's daughter, some woman who might one day need a place where questions came after shelter. She had not known she was saving it for herself. In the carriage, her travel bag rested beside her. Still small, still almost embarrassingly light. One dress, her cloak, coins, mother's hairpin, the decree, the pearl comb wrapped in cloth, and the list she had written in Ashford. What I want. She had folded it carefully and tucked it between the decree and a blank sheet of paper, as if desire needed legal protection before it could survive being carried. Outside the window, fields passed slowly under thin snow. Claire watched them without looking back. That was new. The first time she left Blackwell Palace, her body had listened for pursuit even while her heart begged not to care. Now, no hoofbeats followed. No royal messenger. No guards on the ridge. Dominic had obeyed the boundary. Distance, she was learning, could also be a language. In Briar Glen, the boarding house stood near the river, painted white with green shutters and smoke rising from 2 chimneys. The woman who owned it, Nora Whitcomb, had silver hair, sharp brown eyes, and a ledger tucked under one arm. She looked at Claire's travel bag, then at her face. Staying long or deciding? Claire paused. The answer surprised her by being honest. Deciding. Nora nodded. Best kind of tenant, if she pays weekly. Claire almost smiled. I can. Good. Room upstairs. Window opens. Lock works. Breakfast at 7 unless you're ill, heartbroken, or rich enough to be rude. Claire blinked. I am none of those. Nora gave her a look. One of them, perhaps. Claire did smile then. Small. Unpracticed. Her room was narrow and plain. Bed. Desk. Washstand. A window overlooking the river. No velvet curtains. No crest. No place set aside for a man who might come later and explain why she should have waited. Claire placed her bag on the bed and unpacked slowly. Not because there was much to unpack. Because each object needed a place she chose. The hairpin went on the desk. The decree went in the drawer. The comb stayed wrapped. The list, after a long pause, she pinned beside the window. Visible. A little frightening. Hers. The next morning, Claire walked to the textile house and asked for work. The manager, a woman named Ruth Palmer, looked at Claire's soft hands and fair face with open skepticism. Can you sew? Yes. Can you mend quickly? Yes. Can you take correction without crying? Claire thought of the council hall. The red stamp. Dominic's silence. I can take correction, she said, but I will not take insult and call it instruction. Ruth stared at her, then laughed once. Good. We have enough quiet girls. Sit there. Work began. Thread. Cloth. Measurements. Simple tasks at first, then harder ones. Claire's fingers ached by evening. Her back hurt. She pricked her thumb twice and bled onto scrap fabric once, earning a sharp word from Ruth and a clean bandage from a girl named Annie who asked no questions. At the end of the week, Claire received her first wage. Small. Ordinary. Her own. She held the coins in her palm for longer than necessary. No council had approved them. No king had granted them. No engagement had made them respectable. They were hers because she had worked. That night, she bought bread, apples, and a blue ribbon she did not need. The ribbon made her feel foolish. So she bought it anyway. Days became structured. Work, meals, walks by the river, letters from no one. That last part should have hurt. Sometimes it did. But Dominic's silence was no longer abandonment. It was obedience to a boundary she had set. The difference mattered more than she expected. On the 12th day in Briar Glen, a package arrived through the textile house. Plain wrapping. No crest. Claire recognized the handwriting. Dominic. Her pulse changed. Not leaping. Not breaking. only noticing. She took the package to her room before opening it. Inside was not a letter. It was a copy of a public notice from Blackwell Palace. Elder Hawthorne had been removed from all marriage and bloodline proceedings. Future royal engagements required direct consent from both parties before council review. No woman's silence could be entered into court record as agreement. Claire sat very still. The notice did not mention her. Not once. That was why it reached her. Dominic had changed the system without using her pain as decoration. Beneath the notice was a smaller paper. One sentence. I am learning that regret should become law before it asks to become forgiveness. Claire read it twice, then folded it. She did not answer, but she did not burn it. Instead, she placed it in the drawer beside the decree. Proof was gathering there. Not proof that Dominic deserved her. Proof that leaving had forced truth into rooms that had once survived by naming harm as order. That evening, Claire walked beside the river until the cold reddened her cheeks. She thought of Blackwell Palace, of the room she had emptied, of Dominic stepping aside at the carriage door, of his face when she told him he had loved her only when loving her required nothing. She wondered whether he was eating before council now. Then she stopped walking. The old instinct embarrassed her. Care did not vanish because hurt arrived. That was the unfairness of love. But care no longer had to become duty. Claire turned back toward the boarding house. Her blue ribbon was tied around her wrist beneath her glove, hidden and unnecessary and hers. At the window of her room, the list waited. What I want. She read it before bed. A place where my name is not attached to a throne. Work that pays me directly. Windows that open. The right to leave without being called ungrateful. A conversation only when I choose one. To be loved in a way that notices when I go silent. Claire touched the final line. Not with sadness this time. With recognition. The silence around her no longer sounded like neglect. It sounded like room. And room, she was discovering, was where a woman could grow large enough to stop fitting inside the place others once praised her for accepting. A woman who leaves to find herself does not stop caring overnight. She only stops letting care become a leash around her own throat. Briar Glen became quiet around Claire Bennett in a way Blackwell Palace never had. At the palace, quiet had always been waiting. Waiting for Dominic to return from council. Waiting for the next report to be placed on his desk. Waiting for him to notice she had understood his exhaustion before he named it. Waiting, finally, to learn whether she still mattered when politics made her inconvenient. In Briar Glen, quiet was different. It was the sound of thread pulling through cloth. The river moving beneath thin morning ice. Nora Whitcomb sweeping the front steps while muttering that Frost had no manners. Ruth Palmer correcting a seam with brutal honesty and no hidden cruelty. Annie laughing at lunch with a mouth full of bread because no one had trained her to look graceful while hungry. Claire learned to live inside that kind of quiet. Not perfectly. Some mornings, she woke with her hand curled as if expecting the engagement ring to be there. Some evenings, she turned toward the door when footsteps passed the hall, her body still remembering a king who used to arrive late and expect warmth waiting. Habit was stubborn. So was healing. Work helped. The textile house did not care that she had once been almost queen. A crooked hem remained crooked no matter whose hand had sewn it. A missed measurement could ruin expensive wool. A customer with money and no patience could still complain about the shade of blue as if the entire winter had personally offended him. Claire liked that. Mistakes here had edges she could see. They did not hide behind council language. They could be fixed with thread, scissors, and attention. On the 21st day in Briar Glen, Ruth placed a stack of dark green fabric in front of her. Formal coat lining, she said. Claire touched the cloth. Fine weave. Royal quality. Her fingers recognized it before her mind did. Blackwell order. Ruth watched her face. Do you want me to give it to someone else? Claire looked at the fabric again. There was no crest yet. No name. Just cloth. No, she said. I can do it. Ruth nodded. Good. Hate ruined stitches. Calm anger makes them neat. Claire almost smiled. By afternoon, she had sewn the lining perfectly. Not because it was for Blackwell. Because it was work carrying her name now. That evening, a storm came over Briar Glen. Snow and rain together, striking the windows hard enough that Nora ordered every tenant to stay inside, unless they wanted to be found frozen in a ditch and judged for stupidity. Claire sat in the common room with mending in her lap when the front door opened. Wind entered first. Then Thomas. The old steward stood dripping on Nora's rug, holding his hat in both hands and looking deeply apologetic for existing indoors during weather. Claire rose. Thomas. He bowed. Miss Bennett. Nora appeared behind him with a towel. You are either dying, foolish, or carrying news important enough to justify ruining my floor. Thomas accepted the towel. The second, perhaps. Also the third. Claire's chest tightened. Is Dominic hurt? The question left before she could stop it. Thomas looked at her gently. No relief came. Annoying. Immediate. Human. Claire sat back down slowly. Thomas remained standing. His Majesty sent no message. Claire looked at him. Then why are you here? The old man's face changed. Not courtly now. Personal. I came because I should have spoken years ago. The common room quieted in the way boarding houses did when everyone pretended not to listen and failed. Claire folded the mending in her lap. Thomas swallowed. I watched you become necessary to that palace. I watched them praise you for never asking to be protected in return. Claire said nothing. He continued. I told myself it was not my place to interfere. A bitter smile touched his mouth. Old servants survive by knowing place. That does not make us innocent. The storm pressed against the windows. Claire's hand stayed still. I am not asking forgiveness, Thomas said. Only telling you that when you left, some of us understood too late what we had allowed comfort to cost you. The words settled in the room. Claire looked at him for a long moment. She thought of the Eastern Gate. 6 minutes. The kindness he had given her when it still mattered. You stepped aside, she said. His eyes lowered. After many years of not doing so. Yes. The truth did not soften, but neither did it destroy. Claire nodded toward the chair across from her. Sit before Nora decides your guilt is staining the floor. Nora grunted approval. Thomas sat. For the first time, Claire heard what had happened inside Blackwell Palace after she left. Not the grand version. Not the decree. Not the council's embarrassed compliance. The small things. Dominic dismissing the dinner untouched. Vanessa leaving quietly the next morning after a private conversation no one repeated. The council chamber chair beside Dominic remaining empty because he ordered it removed, then returned, then left unassigned. He said, Thomas murmured, that emptiness should not be hidden just because it shamed him. Claire looked down at her mending. The thread blurred for 1 second. Only one. Thomas added, he has not asked where you are staying. Claire's eyes lifted. I know, but he asks whether the roads south are safe after storms. Claire almost laughed. Almost not. That sounds like him trying to ask without asking. Yes, Thomas admitted. He is improving slowly. Nora snorted from the hearth. Kings usually do. Claire looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the storm erased the road. She did not want Dominic here. Not yet. Maybe not soon. But the idea of him learning to hold concern without turning it into summons made something inside her ache in a quieter way. Not healed. Not ready. Just aware. Thomas left the next morning after the storm broke. Before he went, he placed a small parcel on the table. Claire stiffened. He raised both hands. Not from His Majesty. From me. Inside was a simple wooden box. Empty. For your papers, he said. The ones that prove what others may forget. Claire touched the lid. Plain cedar. No crest. No hidden meaning. Only storage for the pieces of herself she was gathering back. Thank you, she said. Thomas bowed. This time, she stopped him. Thomas. He looked up. Do not bow to me because you feel guilty. His face trembled faintly. Then why may I bow? Claire thought about it. Because you respect that I may tell you not to. For the first time, the old steward smiled. A small, broken thing. As you wish, Miss Bennett. After he left, Claire carried the cedar box upstairs. She placed inside the decree. The public notice. Dominic's one-line note. Her list. The pearl comb remained outside, still undecided. That was allowed. Not every part of the past needed a verdict at once. That night, she added one more line to her list. To be missed without being chased. She stared at it for a long time, then placed the list in the cedar box. Outside, the river moved beneath melting ice. Inside, Claire Bennett sat at her open window, wrapped in a plain shawl she had bought with her own wages, and understood something she had not known at the gate. Dominic stepping aside had not been the end of his test. It had only been the first answer. Every day he did not turn regret into pressure. Every law he changed without using her as proof. Every silence he respected instead of filling with pleas. Those were answers too. And Claire, who had once been praised for understanding her place, was beginning to understand something far more dangerous to every room that had tried to keep her small. Her place could move. Her place could grow. Her place could be chosen again tomorrow. And no one, not even a king, would be allowed to name it before she did. Some men call it patience only after they have exhausted every selfish way to ask for return. Dominic Blackwell had to learn patience before Claire Bennett would believe it was not another name for waiting in place. Spring touched Briar Glen without asking anyone's permission. The river loosened first. Ice cracked in thin silver lines along the banks, then disappeared into dark water that carried winter away in quiet pieces. Market stalls reopened. Children ran through mud as if mud were celebration. Nora Whitcomb declared the season indecently damp and still opened every window in the boarding house before breakfast. Claire Bennett liked spring more than she expected. Not because it was gentle, because it was honest. It did not pretend winter had never happened. It simply grew through it. At the textile house, orders increased with the thawing roads. Merchants wanted lighter cloaks. Brides wanted sleeve alterations. Pack wives wanted new linings before travel season. Claire worked steadily. Her stitches had become cleaner. Her hands had become less soft. A small scar near her thumb marked the first week she learned not to rush thick wool through a stubborn needle. She liked that scar. It belonged to work, not heartbreak. One afternoon, Ruth Palmer placed a sealed envelope beside Claire's sewing basket. Neutral courier brought it. Claire looked at the handwriting. Dominic. Her breath changed. Ruth noticed. Of course she did. Want me to throw it in the stove? Claire almost smiled. No, want me to stand here and look threatening while you open it. That may be worse. Good. I enjoy range. Claire took the letter upstairs after work. She did not open it immediately. That was important. Once, Dominic's attention had determined the temperature of her day. A kind word could warm her. A careless silence could hollow her out. A late apology could rearrange every feeling until she forgot she had been hurt first. Now the envelope waited on her desk while she washed her hands, changed her dress, ate supper, and helped Annie mend a torn sleeve in the common room. Only after night settled did Claire sit by the window and break the seal. No crest, no title, just her name. Claire, I am writing to request permission to visit Briar Glen in 2 weeks. Public place. Your choice. No guards inside. No ring. No expectation. She read that line twice. No expectation. Then continued. There is a matter I would like to tell you in person, but if you prefer, I will send it in writing. If silence is your answer, I will accept it as an answer. The letter ended there. No confession. No pressure. No wound displayed for her to tend. Claire leaned back. The mark of the old ring had faded from her finger months ago, but memory sometimes pressed there anyway. She folded the letter and placed it beside the cedar box. Then she opened her list. What I want. The final line still startled her. To be missed without being chased. Dominic had done that. Not perfectly, but enough that she could no longer pretend he had not changed at all. That frightened her more than if he had remained cruel. Cruelty was easier to leave. Growth asked questions. The next morning, Claire wrote back on plain Briar Glen paper. Dominic, you may come in 2 weeks. The public garden near the river. Noon. 1 hour. No palace business unless I ask. If the matter concerns me, say so in the first sentence. She paused, then added, if it concerns your regret, write it down and read it to yourself. The corner of her mouth lifted. Slightly. She sent the letter before she could soften it. 2 weeks later, Dominic arrived on foot from the village inn. No horse at the garden gate. No royal carriage in the square. No guards visible from where Claire waited beneath a budding ash tree. He wore a plain dark coat. His hair was shorter than she remembered. His face looked the same and not the same, as if regret had not aged him but had removed the ease with which he used to occupy any room. He stopped several steps away. Claire. Dominic. His eyes moved to her face, then to the space between them. He did not close it. Good. You said 1 hour, he said. Yes. I will leave when it ends. We will see if you remember before I remind you. A faint, painful softness crossed his expression. I deserve that. Claire sat on the bench first. Dominic waited until she nodded before sitting at the other end. The river moved beyond the garden wall. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Claire said, first sentence. He looked at her. The matter concerns you, but only because I should have told you what changed after you left. She considered that. Go on. Dominic rested his hands loosely together. The council passed the consent reforms into permanent law. I received the notice. There is more. Claire's fingers tightened once in her lap. Vanessa Hart requested to leave court permanently. That surprised her. Dominic saw it. She said she did not want to be used as a prettier excuse for cowardice. Claire looked toward the river. That sounded sharper than she had expected from Vanessa. Dominic continued. She asked me to tell you that she knew the council was using her return. She let them because she wanted the place they offered. She regrets that. Claire's face stayed calm. Did you forgive her for both of us? No good. I told her her apology was not mine to accept. Better. Silence opened. This one did not hurt as much. Dominic's voice lowered. I also removed myself from marriage review authority. Claire looked back at him. What does that mean? It means the council can no longer use my silence as approval in future betrothal proceedings. I must give a recorded answer. So must the woman involved. Silence cannot stand for either of us. Claire absorbed that. A law born from a sentence behind a curtain. Claire understands her place. Now the law would have to ask. The ache that moved through her was not forgiveness. It was grief for every woman who would have needed that law before her. That is good, she said. Dominic bowed his head. It is late. Yes. He accepted the correction. They sat in the public garden while townspeople moved along the river path. An old man fed birds. Two girls carried baskets of spring greens. A boy tried to skip stones and failed loudly. Ordinary life surrounded them. Claire liked having witnesses who did not care enough to make them a spectacle. Dominic looked at her hands. This time, not at the absent ring. At the small scar near her thumb. You are working. Yes. Textiles. Yes. Do you like it? Claire thought about the question. I like being corrected by people who are not trying to own me. Dominic closed his eyes once. Only once. When he opened them, he said, I am glad. No hidden pain asking her to comfort him. No tragic expression arranged for forgiveness. Just glad. Claire believed that much. The hour moved strangely. Slow in places. Fast in others. They spoke of Briar Glen. Of Thomas. Of Nora, whom Dominic had apparently met once at the village inn and had been told by her that kings should learn to knock like everyone else. She told you that. She did. What did you say? I knocked. Claire laughed before she could stop herself. Small. Startled. Real. Dominic went very still. She saw it. The way he treasured the sound and tried not to reach for more of it. That restraint made the laugh remain hers. The garden bell rang 1. Noon to 1. Their hour ended. Dominic stood immediately. Claire looked up at him. You were watching the time. Yes. Afraid I would remind you? Afraid I would make you need to. The answer settled between them. Careful. Clean. Claire stood too. The river wind moved through her hair. For months, she had thought the next step would be either return or refusal. But life, infuriatingly, had more shapes than endings. You may write again, she said. Dominic's face changed. Not triumph. Relief, held gently. What may I write about? She considered. Ordinary things. Laws, if they affect me. Thomas, if he insists on being dramatic. No pleas. No rings. No promises about forever. A pause. And you may ask one question per letter. His mouth softened. 1. You spent a year assuming. Practice asking slowly. He bowed his head. As you wish. The phrase might once have angered her. Now it simply marked the place where he stopped. Dominic stepped back. Then another step. Not because she told him to. Because leaving the space open had become part of the language he was learning. Claire watched him walk toward the village road. Halfway there, he stopped. Not turning. Just standing still for one breath. As if the old instinct to look back had risen. Then he continued. Claire appreciated that more than she wanted to admit. She returned to the boarding house with spring air in her lungs and no answer ready for what came next. That night, she opened the cedar box and added Dominic's latest letter. Not on top of the decree. Not beside the comb. In its own place. A request granted. A boundary kept. A conversation that ended when promised. Small things. But healing, she was learning, was often built from small things repeated until the body believed them. Before bed, she added one line to her list. To hear my name without fearing what will be asked of me next. Then she left the window open. Outside, Briar Glen breathed in the dark. Inside, Claire slept with the strange knowledge that Dominic Blackwell had come when invited, left when expected, and given her nothing she had to carry except the possibility that change, if it wanted to matter, would have to keep arriving quietly and on time. Trust does not return as a grand confession. It returns as the quiet shock of a promise kept so many times that the body stops preparing for disappointment. Dominic Blackwell wrote every 12 days. Not every week. Not whenever loneliness sharpened. Every 12 days. Because Claire Bennett had once mentioned that weekly letters could become a rhythm too easy to mistake for obligation. He remembered. That unsettled her. The first letter after Briar Glen contained exactly one question. Do the river winds make sowing harder in spring? Claire stared at it for almost a minute, then laughed. Not because it was charming. Because it was absurdly ordinary for a man who had once ruled council halls with a glance. She answered 3 days later. Yes, the thread tangles. Ruth says I blame the wind because blaming my own hands would be less poetic. His reply came 12 days after that. Ruth sounds wise. My question, do you still wear your mother's hairpin? Claire touched the silver pin at her throat. She answered truthfully. Yes, it is the only thing I carried from the palace that never belonged to you. For 3 days after sending it, she wondered if the sentence had been too sharp. Then his answer arrived. I am glad you had something with you that did not have to be returned to yourself. Claire folded that letter more carefully than the others. Summer came slowly. Briar Glen filled with color. Blue cloth awnings stretched over the market street. Children ran barefoot along the riverbank. Nora Whitcomb began putting lemon slices in cold tea and pretending it was a medical necessity. Claire worked, earned, paid her rent early, bought a second pair of shoes, and felt foolishly proud of the sound they made on the boarding house stairs. Dominic kept writing. One question per letter. Never more. What color do you choose when no one else is choosing for you? Do you prefer the river in morning or evening? Does Briar Glen feel like a stop or a place? Claire answered when she wanted. Sometimes after 2 days. Sometimes after 10. Once, not at all. His next letter did not ask why. No question this time. Only hoping the silence is comfortable. Claire sat with that sentence by the open window until twilight turned the river silver. Silence is comfortable. No one had ever hoped that for her before. They had hoped her silence meant patience, agreement, forgiveness, grace. Dominic had begun hoping it meant rest. That was different enough to hurt. In late summer, Ruth sent Claire to deliver finished coats to the merchant hall. It was ordinary work, until she entered and saw Vanessa Hart standing near the fabric counter. Claire stopped. Vanessa turned. For a moment, the room narrowed around them. Vanessa looked different outside Blackwell Palace. Less polished, or perhaps less armored. Her golden hair was braided simply. Her pale gown had no royal pearls. She held a parcel of linen in both hands, fingers tightening when she saw Claire. Miss Bennett, Vanessa said. Claire nodded. Miss Hart. The silence between them was not friendly, but it was not the council hall either. Vanessa drew a breath. I did not know you were here. I work here. The words made Vanessa's eyes shift. Not pity. Surprise. Then something like respect arriving late and unsure where to stand. I heard you were doing well. Claire almost said from whom. She did not need to. Vanessa lowered her gaze. I owe you an apology. Claire held the stack of coats against her arm. You may offer one. Vanessa looked up. The distinction landed. Good. I knew the council wanted to use my return to reopen the engagement. I told myself it was not my decision. That if Dominic chose me, or did not choose me, responsibility was his. Claire said nothing. Vanessa's voice tightened. But I stood there while they made you smaller. And I let being wanted by the room matter more to me than what the room was doing to you. The honesty was plain, unadorned. Claire could respect plain things now. That is true, she said. Vanessa swallowed. Yes. Claire waited. Vanessa seemed to understand that apology did not obligate comfort. I am sorry, she said. Claire looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once. I hear you. Vanessa's face flickered with pain, but she did not ask whether that meant forgiveness. That improved the apology. Claire delivered the coats and left. Her hands shook only after she reached the river. Not badly. Enough to remind her that composure still had costs. That evening, she wrote to Dominic before the 12 days had passed. I saw Vanessa today. She apologized. I did not forgive her. I did not punish her either. I thought you should know because once I would have expected you to explain her pain to me. I am glad I no longer need you to. She almost crossed out the last sentence, then left it. His answer came 6 days later, earlier than usual, because she had written first. I am glad you did not need me in that room. I am sorry I once made rooms harder for you by asking you to understand everyone except yourself. Claire read that sentence in the common room while Nora shelled peas beside her. Nora glanced over. Good letter or stupid letter? Claire folded it. Good. Dangerous. Yes. Nora nodded. Good things often are when you have survived bad ones. Autumn approached. The first anniversary of the broken engagement neared without announcement, though Claire felt it in her bones before the calendar confirmed it. Some days were heavier. She became quieter at work. Ruth noticed and handed her simpler seams without comment. Annie brought her sugared bread and said nothing. Nora placed a hot brick beneath her blanket at night and pretended all tenants received such luxury. Dominic's letter came 2 days before the anniversary. No question. Only this. 1 year ago, I let a room teach you that your place depended on my courage. I am spending the rest of my life unlearning the man who allowed that. This is not a request, only a record. Claire held the letter until her fingers warmed the page. A record. He was learning her language too. On the anniversary, Claire took the pearl comb to the river. She had kept it wrapped for months. Neither sold, nor thrown away, nor worn. An undecided object from a life that had waited in her drawer like a question. Dominic had given it to her after a treaty dinner, saying it suited her because it was elegant without asking for attention. At the time, she had blushed. Now she heard the problem. Elegant without asking. Claire stood at the riverbank with the comb in her hand. It was beautiful. That was allowed. It had hurt her. That was also allowed. She did not throw it into the water. Instead, she took it to the jeweler near the bridge and sold it for a fair price. With the money, she bought a heavy wool coat, 3 books, and a small blue glass vase for her window. The vase caught evening light and scattered it across the wall. That felt better than revenge. That night, Claire wrote one sentence on a new piece of paper and placed it in the cedar box. I can turn what hurt me into something that keeps me warm. Winter returned. Dominic came to Briar Glen twice more, always by invitation, always public, always leaving at the agreed hour. On the 3rd visit, snow began during their walk by the river. Claire had forgotten gloves. Dominic noticed. He removed his own and held them out, then stopped before offering them fully. May I? Claire looked at the gloves, then at him. Once, he would have taken her hands and warmed them inside his without asking, and she would have called it tenderness because she wanted the word badly enough. Now he waited. The snow settled on his dark hair. Claire extended her hands. Yes. He gave her the gloves. Did not touch her fingers. She put them on herself. They were too large. Warm. She laughed softly at how ridiculous her hands looked. Dominic smiled. Not like a king. Like a man relieved to witness joy without owning it. They walked until the hour ended. At the boarding house steps, Claire removed the gloves and returned them. This time, their fingers brushed. Barely. Accidental. The contact was small. The silence after it was not. Dominic did not reach again. Claire did not step back. Snow fell between them. Her heart hurt in a way that no longer felt like warning alone. That frightened her, but not enough to make her run. Good night, Dominic, she said. Good night, Claire. He left on time. Of course he did. That night, Claire opened her list. What I want. She read every line, then added one more. To come closer only when distance remains allowed. She stared at the words, then closed the cedar box. Outside, Briar Glen settled under snow. Inside, Claire stood by the blue glass vase, watching moonlight scatter across her wall, and understood that she had not returned to the woman she was before the broken engagement. She had become someone harder to keep and easier to respect. Someone who could miss Dominic without belonging to him. Someone who could feel her heart turn toward him and still ask whether the door remained open behind her. And far away, or perhaps not far enough, Dominic Blackwell was learning that love after loss did not mean convincing Claire to come back. It meant becoming the kind of man she could approach without losing the road out. The closer Claire Bennett came to forgiving him, the more carefully she measured whether forgiveness was becoming another room she was expected to enter. Winter stayed longer than Briar Glen wanted. Snow gathered along the riverbanks in hard white ridges. Frost silvered the boarding house windows each morning. The textile house smelled of wool, steam, and cold fingers warming around mugs of tea before work began. Claire liked the season anyway. Winter did not flatter. It made every warm thing prove itself. Dominic Blackwell came only when invited. That remained a rule. Sometimes Claire invited him to walk by the river. Sometimes to sit in the public room at Nora's boarding house while tenants came and went around them. Once, to the textile house after Ruth decided the Alpha King should learn how expensive formal coat linings became when councilmen changed fashion requirements after ordering. Dominic listened to Ruth's lecture with the grave attention of a man being punished by economics. Claire laughed behind a stack of folded cloth. He heard it. Of course he did. But he did not turn the sound into a victory. He only looked down, smiled faintly, and let Ruth continue explaining thread waste as if it were a national crisis. Small things kept happening. Dangerous things. Not dramatic. Not enough for a ballad. Enough for a heart that had once survived on crumbs to ask whether steadiness could be trusted when it arrived without spectacle. Dominic remembered the hour. Always. He knocked before entering any room she occupied. Always. He asked before walking her back after dusk. Always. When Claire went quiet, he did not fill the silence with apologies or panic. He waited. Not perfectly at first. Sometimes his hands tightened. Sometimes his eyes searched her face as if fear still lived close beneath his skin. But he did not make that fear her work. That was the difference. One evening, Nora hosted a winter supper for the boarding house tenants. It was crowded, loud, and aggressively warm. Ruth came. Annie came with her younger brother. Thomas arrived with a basket of Blackwell oranges and was immediately scolded by Nora for bringing fruit like an apology from an empire. Dominic arrived last. Invited by Claire. Not by Nora, though Nora claimed she had allowed it for educational purposes. He stood in the doorway with snow on his shoulders and no idea where to put his hands while half the room pretended not to stare. Claire looked up from slicing bread. Their eyes met. The old pull moved between them. Not ownership. Not expectation. Recognition, softer now because both of them had learned to stand without letting it decide for them. You may hang your coat there, Claire said. Dominic did. You may sit near Thomas. Dominic looked at Thomas. Thomas looked alarmed. Nora said, Good. Old guilt should sit with old guilt. Thomas sighed. Dominic sat. The supper unfolded strangely. Ordinary conversation tried to make room for royalty and eventually gave up. Annie's brother asked Dominic whether kings ever got blisters from sword training. Dominic answered honestly. Ruth asked whether he understood that textile workers needed better bridge protections during spring floods. Dominic asked for details. Nora told him his posture made the soup nervous. Claire watched him become less a monument and more a man in a room where no one owed him reverence. He did not shrink from it. That mattered more than elegance ever had. After supper, Claire went to the kitchen to rinse cups. Dominic followed only as far as the doorway, then stopped. May I help? Claire looked at the stack of dishes, then at the Alpha King of Blackwell, standing uncertainly beneath drying herbs. Yes. He rolled up his sleeves. Badly. Claire did not correct him. Nora did from across the room. Not like you're preparing for execution. Like you've seen water before. Dominic obeyed. Claire pressed her lips together to keep from laughing. He saw. This time he smiled fully. The sight startled her. Not because it was beautiful, though it was. Because she remembered wanting that smile once and accepting so little else in exchange. Now it arrived while he was washing cups in a boarding house kitchen because she had asked. Her chest tightened. Dominic noticed immediately. The smile faded. He set the cup down. Did I do something wrong? The question came quietly. Not defensive. Not frightened enough to demand reassurance. Claire looked at the soapy water. No, a pause. I remembered wanting less than this and thinking it was too much to ask. Dominic's face changed. Pain moved through him, but stayed where it belonged. With him. I am sorry, he said. I know. The words were not forgiveness. But they were no longer disbelief. That night, after everyone left, Dominic stood with Claire on the boarding house porch. Snow had stopped. The road shone pale beneath moonlight. The air was cold enough to make breath visible. Claire wore his gloves again. This time, he had brought them and placed them on the porch rail without offering. She had chosen to put them on. A small arrangement. A quiet language. I am thinking of returning to Blackwell Palace, she said. Dominic went utterly still. She looked at him sharply. For one day. He bowed his head once, as if restraining hope by force. One day. I want to collect the books I left. A few personal things. Nothing ceremonial. Yes. I do not want council present. They will not be. I do not want Vanessa there. She is not at court. I do not want anyone to call me Lady Claire. I will instruct them. No, Claire said. He stopped. She looked toward the road. You will not instruct them to respect me because I am coming. You will make it policy that women who leave court are not stripped of name, dignity, or address by gossip. Dominic absorbed that, then nodded. Yes. And if someone still says it? His voice was quiet. Then you may correct them, or I will if you ask. Good. Not I will handle it. Not I will protect you. If you ask. Claire looked at him. You are learning. I am trying. That is not the same. No, he said. But it is what I have until learning becomes proof. She turned her hands inside the oversized gloves. Warm. Too large. Given without hold. I will come in 3 days, she said. I will arrange a neutral carriage. I can arrange my own. Yes, he said. You can. The ease of the answer hurt. In a good way. The kind of hurt that came when the body realized a door was not locked anymore and still needed time to believe it. 3 days later, Claire returned to Blackwell Palace. Not before dawn. Not through the eastern gate in flight. In daylight. By choice. The palace rose the same as ever. Black stone, silver banners, winter towers. But Claire did not feel smaller as the carriage approached. She felt aware. That was different. Dominic waited at the front steps. No counsel. No Vanessa. No formal receiving line. Only Thomas nearby, and 2 servants who bowed because they saw her, not because someone had announced her. Claire stepped from the carriage without taking Dominic's hand. He had not offered it. Good. Claire, he said. Dominic. The palace seemed to listen. Let it. She walked inside. Every corridor remembered her. The healer room. The council passage. The winter garden. The grand hall where a red stamp had broken what love should have defended. Claire's breathing changed when they passed it. Dominic noticed. He stopped. You do not have to enter. I know. That was why she did. The grand hall was empty. No council table. No crowd. No Vanessa in ivory. Only light falling through high windows and polished stone reflecting a woman who had once stood there with a ring on her hand and humiliation in her throat. Claire walked to the center of the room. Dominic stayed near the door. 3 steps would have been too close here. He understood. The silence inside the hall was different now. It no longer held her down. It waited. Claire looked at the place where Elder Hawthorne had stamped the contract. Then at her bare hand. I thought this room ended me, she said. Dominic's voice came from behind her. It ended the version of us I did not deserve to keep. Claire closed her eyes once. The truth moved through her. Painful. Clean. She opened them. No, she said softly. It ended the version of me who thought being kept was the same as being loved. Dominic said nothing. Good. Some sentences did not need answering. Claire turned and walked out of the hall on her own. Upstairs, her old room had been left untouched except for dust removed and fire laid but unlit. The pearl comb was gone because she had sold it. The blue shawl remained on the chair. The books waited on the shelf. She packed them slowly. 3 books. A journal. A painted box from childhood. Nothing from the engagement. At the desk, she found the suspended contract. Still there. Dominic had not destroyed it. She looked at him. He stood outside the room, not crossing the threshold. I kept it because I did not want the palace to forget what it did when remembering became inconvenient, he said. Claire touched the paper, then folded it. This belongs in my cedar box. His eyes darkened. Yes. She placed it with her books. When she finished, Dominic walked her to the carriage. At the steps, she stopped. The ring was not mentioned. Not once. That mattered too. I may come again, Claire said. His breath caught, but he held still. When I choose. Yes. And I may not. Yes. She studied him. The palace behind him was still powerful, still dangerous, still full of rooms that had once praised her for silence. But Dominic was no longer asking her to fit inside them unchanged. That did not make return simple. It made choice possible. Claire climbed into the carriage. Before the door closed, she looked at him. Thank you for not making today about you. Dominic bowed his head. I am learning that your return to any room is not my reward. The carriage door closed. As Blackwell Palace moved away behind her, Claire held the folded contract in her lap. Not as a wound reopened, as evidence recovered. The road to Briar Glen stretched ahead. Open. Waiting. Hers. And for the first time, Claire understood that healing did not mean the palace no longer hurt. It meant she could enter it, name what happened, take back what was hers, and leave again without asking the past for permission. The final test of love was not whether Dominic Blackwell could bring Claire Bennett back. It was whether he could let her keep leaving and still love her without turning the door into a wound. Summer came to Briar Glen with open windows. Claire Bennett kept the blue glass vase on her desk and filled it with river flowers that bent too quickly in the heat. She worked at the textile house 4 days a week now, not 6, because Ruth Palmer had promoted her to pattern review and declared that good eyes deserved fewer ruined fingers. Nora Whitcomb called that favoritism. Ruth called it talent. Claire called it wages earned without anyone attaching them to gratitude. The cedar box stayed beneath her desk. Inside it were the decree, the public notice, her list, Dominic's letters, the suspended engagement contract, and the one-line truths that had slowly changed the shape of her silence. She did not open it every day anymore. That was how she knew healing had become real. Proof remained, but it no longer had to hold her upright every morning. Dominic came to Briar Glen once every month. Then, when she invited him, twice. Always announced, always asked, always left on time unless Claire herself extended the hour. At first, their meetings stayed in public. The river garden, the textile house office, Nora's front room with half the boarding house pretending not to listen. Then one evening in late summer, rain trapped them beneath the bakery awning after the market closed. Claire laughed at the absurdity of Dominic Blackwell, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, standing solemnly with a paper bag of cinnamon buns under one arm because Nora had ordered him to bring dessert if he insisted on looking noble near dinner. He looked at her then, not carefully enough to hide everything, not boldly enough to claim anything, just looked, and Claire felt something in her answer. Not the old ache, not the desperate wish to be chosen, something quieter, freer. She took one cinnamon bun from the bag. "You may walk me home after the rain stops," she said. Dominic went still, then nodded. "As you wish." The rain stopped 20 minutes later. He walked beside her, not behind, beside, because she had chosen that distance. Their sleeves brushed once near the bridge. He did not make it more than it was. That was why, 3 steps later, Claire let her hand touch his. Only briefly, only enough. Dominic stopped breathing. Claire glanced at him. "Do not look like that." His voice was rough. "Like what?" "Like I handed you the kingdom." His eyes moved to their hands, not touching now, but close. "You handed me trust." Claire looked away first, not because she was embarrassed, because he was right. Autumn brought the annual Blackwell Harvest Gathering. Claire received an invitation written in Dominic's hand, not to sit beside him, not to appear as restored fiancée. Only this: "You are invited as Claire Bennett, if you wish to come. If you do not, nothing changes between us." She almost did not go, not from fear, from the old irritation that palaces made every choice feel larger than ordinary life. Then she read the second line again. "If you do not, nothing changes between us." So she went, not in blue, not in silver, in a deep brown dress she had sewn herself, fitted to her body without apology. Her mother's hairpin held her soft brown hair back. Her fair face looked calm in the carriage window, but not empty. Blackwell Palace opened before her. This time, the eastern gate did not feel like escape. The grand hall was full when she entered. Conversation faltered. Of course it did. Some nobles looked at her bare hand. Some looked behind her, searching for Dominic. He was not there. That was deliberate. Claire realized it with something like warmth. He had not arranged her entrance around himself. Thomas greeted her first, then stepped aside, not guiding, only welcoming. "Miss Bennett." "Thomas." His eyes shone faintly. Nora, who had come as Claire's companion and had already insulted 2 chandeliers, leaned close and muttered, "If anyone says suspended, I will hit them with a tart." Claire almost laughed. Dominic entered 10 minutes later. The hall shifted again, but when his eyes found Claire, he did not cross the room immediately. He waited. Claire looked at him, then gave the smallest nod. Only then did he approach. The court saw that. "Good. Let them learn." "Claire," he said. "Dominic." No title, no claim, no apology performed for witnesses. Just names, finally strong enough to stand without contract. An elder near the refreshment table bowed too deeply. "Lady Claire, it is an honor to see you return to your rightful." Dominic turned. Claire lifted one hand. He stopped. She faced the elder herself. "My name is Miss Bennett." The elder paled. "Of course. And I have returned for the harvest gathering, not to occupy a place you are eager to name before I choose it." The silence that followed was beautiful. Nora whispered, "Good tart saved." Dominic's mouth moved once. Claire looked at him. He lowered his gaze, but she saw the smile he hid. That mattered too. Later, in the winter garden where he had once given her the engagement ring, Dominic stood beside her beneath roses that had survived another year. No crowd, no music, only glass walls, evening light, and the memory of a promise that had not been strong enough the first time. "I thought this place would hurt more," Claire said. Dominic kept his hands at his sides. "Does it?" "Yes." A pause. But not only. He accepted the answer without asking her to explain the part that might help him hope. Claire touched a rose petal. "You asked me to stand beside you here once." "I did." "You meant it." "I did." "You did not understand what beside required." His voice was low. "No," she turned toward him. "What do you think it requires now?" Dominic looked at her for a long moment, then answered slowly, "That you are able to leave without me turning it into betrayal. That if you stay, it is not because I have made leaving costly. That your silence is not agreement. That your comfort matters before my pride. That I ask before naming your place." Claire's throat tightened. Each sentence entered softly, not as poetry, as evidence of work done in the dark, again and again, when she was not there to reward it. "And if I never wear your ring again?" Pain moved through him. He did not hide it. He did not offer it to her. "Then I will love you without making metal the proof." Claire breathed in. The garden smelled of soil, glass, and late roses. "I sold the pearl comb," she said. His eyes warmed with surprise. "I know." "You know?" "Thomas told me after I asked whether you had kept it. Then he told me that was not my business unless you made it mine." Claire laughed softly. "Thomas is learning too." "Yes," Dominic said. "He enjoys correcting me now." "As he should." A silence. Then Claire reached into the pocket of her dress. Dominic went still when she withdrew a small folded paper. Not the ring. Not the contract. Her list. "What I want." Worn at the edges from being opened many times. She unfolded it. "I have most of these now," she said. Dominic did not step closer. "What remains?" Claire read the final lines silently. "To be loved in a way that notices when I go silent. To be missed without being chased. To come closer only when distance remains allowed. To hear my name without fearing what will be asked of me next." She folded the paper again. "Distance," she said. "I need to know it remains allowed even if I come closer." Dominic's voice roughened. "It remains allowed. I may keep my room in Briar Glen. Yes. I may keep working. Yes. I may visit Blackwell and leave again. Yes. I may love you and still refuse to become the woman who disappeared beside you." Dominic closed his eyes once. When he opened them, they were bright with something too deep to be victory. "Yes." Claire studied him. The man before her was not innocent. She did not need him to be. Innocence could not repair what harm had taught. But accountability could build something stronger than innocence. Slowly, she held out her hand. "Bare. No ring." Dominic looked at it, then at her face. "May I?" Claire smiled faintly. "You are allowed to ask better questions than that." His breath caught. Then, carefully, he asked, "May I hold your hand for as long as you want me to?" The answer loosened something old inside her. "Yes." Dominic took her hand. Lightly, warmly. No tightening when her fingers trembled. No pull. No claim. Only contact waiting for her to decide whether it continued. Claire let it. Outside the glass, harvest lanterns began to glow across the palace grounds. Inside, the winter garden held them quietly. Not restored. Not returned to what had been. Something else. Something chosen after the damage had been named. "I do not know what we become," Claire said. Dominic's thumb stayed still against her hand. "Then we will not name it before you choose." She looked at him. "Before we choose." The correction reached him slowly, then changed his face completely. Not triumph. Wonder. "Yes," he said. "Before we choose." Claire stepped closer. Only one step. But it was hers. For the first time since the engagement broke, the silence between them did not ask her to endure. It made room. And in that room, Claire Bennett stood beside Dominic Blackwell, not because a council approved, not because a ring demanded, not because a king finally regretted loudly enough to be forgiven. She stood there because she could still leave. Because he knew it. Because she knew it. Because love, if it was going to live again, would have to keep honoring the open door. Later, people would say the Alpha King won her back after the broken engagement. They would be wrong. Claire was not one. She returned to herself first. Everything after that was invitation. And Dominic Blackwell, who had once stopped her from leaving, finally understood the only reason she could come closer now. He had learned to step aside, and this time, she chose not to pass.